What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we're going to do the verses that a lot of you guys have asked for between the DS Starscream and the Takara Starscream. I have mixed feelings about it. I've already done the verses, so I know how it turns out, and I will let you know that it was very enjoyable for me. It was this is one for the books for going through the process of it. A lot of times I either know how it's going to turn out, or I have a feeling how it might turn out given certain scenarios, and I didn't see this one coming. So it was interesting, and I like to be pleasantly surprised in that way. And I don't really have a dog in the fight because I don't have either of the figures, and I'm not going to get either. So yeah, it should be good. Before we get into that, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. For one, TFCon is coming. I will have a table there. Feel free to swing by, say hello, etc., etc. It's coming up quick. It's less than a month away now. It's in Baltimore, so I hope to see you there. I'll have a lot more videos and stuff coming soon about what to expect in terms of merchandise that I'll have there available. I also post a lot of it on Instagram. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I post a lot of the stuff there at Bobby Skullface. It's where I get more personal. I have more fun on that platform, so that's if you want a lot of little inside look at stuff, that's where I'm at. I'm in the stories. And then also if I'm banged up one night and I post something in a story, I know it's only going to be up for 24 hours and then it'll be gone. Win-win. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping. Not much. The Diaclone stuff, some people are surprised by that. If I had the opportunity to look at that kind of stuff and I don't have anything else kind of heavy on the agenda, then I'm happy to take a look at it. When you come into circumstances like this week, I have another Diaclone video coming, spoilers, probably next week, that something big comes in that's Transformers related, that takes precedence, right? So we do the DS and get that done, and then we move on. So yeah, look forward to that. Sit Down Saturday from last week was really interesting to look at the comments, and I'll be honest with you, I feel the same way as most of you. There are people that are like, man, I would have preferred this one, but the Takara came out, and I don't see the need to kind of jump up between the two, and I get it, man. I totally get it, because at a certain point, the swap out is only worth so much. I'm at a point with a lot of this stuff regarding Transformers specifically, because many of them have gotten so good that for me to swap out a piece, it has to be astronomically better for the most part, or at least something like, boom, significantly different than something that I was more looking forward to or looking for in regards to my collection. So I get it. There's a lot of people that were saying it, and I echo your sentiments. But I just think it's interesting, not necessarily the piece, but what I think is interesting is how competition has changed and how different it was, 3 years ago in comparison to what it is now 3-4 years ago. So now, it's a totally different ball game. They're competing at the exact same space. Whereas before it was like, man, whose aesthetic do you like better? Whose kind of choices do you think are cooler? Instead, it was more interesting in my opinion. But be that as it may, interesting nonetheless. And then lastly was this DS, and a lot of people were upset with my transformation. Look, I'm not here to do tutorials. That's not my goal here. It's not my objective. I'm not creating this stuff with the intent of saying use me as a blueprint to transform your figure. That's not it. My whole goal here, my whole mission is to look at a review and look at a figure rather and give you a review of my opinion on it. If you're interested in my opinion on something, feel free to watch. If you're not, probably shouldn't watch. I show the transformation. Sometimes if I come across a trick or something it's worth showing, but I show it because I kind of feel like I have to, for one, and for two, if I have an opinion about the transformation that's either good or bad, at least I have documented evidence as to why. And nothing's different here. There are many reviewers who know how challenging this transformation is. It's a nightmare. I'm not fond of this Takara Starscream. And I know a lot of people have like a dog in this fight, so they think that like I'm choosing the opposite team, or I'm not playing on their team, or I don't care. I'm sticking with my make toys for now. So I'm not your enemy. I'm just telling you what I think. I run into this all the time. The same reason why people kind of end up here is because they like that I take a stand on something. But then when I take a stand on something that they don't agree with, then they get shocked and surprised. It's not what I'm about here. And it's changed over the years because now I care even less about the subscribers in terms of numbers and performance and all that stuff. I could have got this video out a day quicker. But for me, it's kind of more interesting. Not maybe more interesting, but for me, I like my channel having like a video and then a break and then a video. Like you can kind of set your watch to it. Like you know what to expect. I'm not in the rat race of that anymore. There's a universe that exists where I move the majority of my stuff to a different platform. And that lights out, you know what I'm saying? And that day is quickly approaching. And it approaches even faster when I get some of the comments that I got regarding this thing previously. A lot of reviewers have their niche. Some are really good at transformation. Some are really good at, their lighting and all that kind of stuff and really kind of showcasing the figure. My niche is how I feel. and then I'm going to tell you how I feel every time. Sometimes you might disagree, because there's no one on the planet that has the exact same feelings as you. But we're going to talk more about this guy and more about my feelings regarding it in about 20 seconds. So I was really, you guys knew that this had to come, right? That, like, you had to pair these two off against each other, because once again, they're competing for the exact same space. The price is way different, and there's some other things that are different as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move into it. This is Deformation Space Crimson Wings versus Takara Tomi's Starscream 3.0. Accessory-wise, the DS comes with just the faces and the guns, basically, while the Takara comes with faces, guns, Megatron's guns, blast effects, actually more faces, more face options, maybe some that shouldn't have been there, but you know what I mean? It comes with a flight stand that's kind of useless, but it still comes with it. Like, there's a ton more in regard to accessories than the Transform element, I mean, the DS offers. So in that regard, I mean, I think it's obvious that Takara has to take the cake here. Moving on to build and materials, I can't give Takara much leeway here because mine is built so shoddy. And in order for mine to even stand up, I have to kind of angle the pelvis up and then angle the chest back to have some sort of weird dance to get some sort of balance going on for the knees not to collapse. So I certainly can't give them credit for the build or the materials. Also, even though there's inconsistencies in the tolerances, the DS is built better. The materials feel better. Hardware-wise, I gotta tie them out because they both have it. That's just being objective. If I'm giving the build point to DS, then I gotta tie them for hardware because they have them. The Takara one isn't worth anything, but it has it. So I have to be fair there and tie that out. So build and materials go to DS, hardware is a tie. Moving on to looking at sculpt and paint. From the front, I think it's pretty much a tie. There are things that I like about both. There are things that I prefer about one over the other, and vice versa. I think the color palette instantly says Starscream more on the DS, so I want to give them the point, and I might have to. I think I'm gonna give them the point for paint here because they won't get it in a lot of other places, but the overall color palette just seems so much more appropriate on the DS than it does on the Takara. I think that's the only fair way to do it. Sculpt-wise, I'm gonna tie them out. Looking at the head sculpt, I think sculpt-wise, it's gotta go to DS. To me, it just looks so much better, both proportionately and just kind of capturing the character. Now, obviously, I'm looking at a smirk versus a straight face, but still, I don't find much difference. And paint-wise, they're both painted, and nothing is really super special about the Takara one at this point, so I think from the front, we'll tie them out. From the side, sculpt-wise, I think I gotta give it to Takara because the face juts out a bit from the helmet, which I do like, but generally speaking, not a whole lot of difference between the two here. Now, for the chest and torso, I gotta give it to Takara for the deco. The paint pops on the red so much better on the Takara, and the kind of fogged out orange, like amber lens on the cockpit looks so much better as well, in my opinion. Whereas on the DS, there's a couple things about it. The super light translucent plastic, also the no differentiation between the red and gray along the neck and collarbone area. I just think Takara got that better. I think the chest has to go to Takara in both categories. From the front. From the side, I gotta give the sculpt to the DS. The Takara's just such a mess. You know, I just can't in good conscience give it to him. Obviously, I have my ab crunch being utilized here once again just to keep the figure balanced, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as purposeful. It doesn't look as clean. Looking at the arms from the front, I think it's a wash. There's things that I like about each. There's things that irritate me about each. I don't like the double jointed elbow cutting into the bicep at the bottom of the DS, but I hate it at the top of the bicep of the Takara. Otherwise, I don't think there's anything else to really write home about. They're very comparable in that regard. Similar situation from the side, except I do hate the way that they did the transformation of the null ray, and there's some gappy stuff going on in the blue if you look closely. So if I had to give an edge to one, it would definitely go to the DS here. The paint would go to Takara. The pelvis is another part where I feel like Takara shines, so to speak. The red paint pops better, and the general sculpt of it is just more interesting in my opinion. They both have the flaps and such, but with or without that, I just think it speaks to the Takara sculpt and paint here. here. From the side, I gotta give it to DS. It has a back to it, whereas the Takara one hides a bunch of flaps and panels them up. So yeah, I can't, man. I would like to, because I do think that the pelvis is one of the best pieces of the Takara, so to speak, but I can't here. Looking at the legs, I think the proportions of the legs in the DS are better in terms of sculpt, but they're both very similar. Very, very similar. I like the feet perhaps better on the Takara, whereas I like the kind of thigh-calf ratio far better on the DS. Paint-wise, it's about equal, but Takara is going to win the paint category because of the issues with the DS anyway. From the side, I think that the DS is cleaner. It's smoother, it looks more purposeful, it doesn't look like it's trying to hide anything, so I think it takes it here too. From the back, I mean, there's just no contest. Like, the DS just looks better across the board, pretty much. The back of the knees for the Takara is interesting, but I mean, that's all I got. They tie in a number of categories here, sculpt-wise, because the DS looks better from the front, whereas the Takara looks better from the side in regards to the head. The torso is kind of the opposite, as is the hips. Now, the thighs are just white blocks, right? So, tie. And then I think the DS just takes it from the front as well. But if I were to be critical and try to be as objective as possible, they're so similar that I'll tie them out there as well. Now the back, the DS takes, the lower legs, the DS takes, and the arms, the DS takes, because they tie from the front, but the DS is more well kept from the side. So Takara takes nothing here, and DS takes 3 categories, but Takara takes paint. So at the end of the day, DS gets sculpt, Takara gets paint. Let's go through articulation. So for the DS, we have this head that's on this ball peg connection that comes up to a hinge, gets you pretty far up and down, side to side, and a little bit of confused Starscream look. The Takara is the one that originated that bit of engineering, so it pretty much does the same thing. The DS has shoulders that get you up to 90 degrees, a little bit above perhaps, a butterfly that gets you forward, and the soft ratchet around. The Takara has a double hinge system for the arm that gets you the full length at the shoulder, plus around, and the butterfly. But speaking of bicep, we have a bicep swivel. We have a bicep swivel. We have a double jointed elbow for the full run. We have a double jointed elbow for the full run. However, it's not a technical double jointed elbow. It cheats it, but I think it gets credit for it. Wrist swivel, hinge outward. The thumb has a base hinge ball peg that comes out to a primary and secondary hinge for the thumb. The fingers are individually articulated with primary and secondary hinges for the fingers as well. The Takara has a wrist swivel and hinge back, and it might even hinge forward. It does. And then the fingers are on a base pin knuckle with another hinge, so it ends up basically being the same thing. The thumb is the same as well. We have a waist swivel and an ab crunch. No waist swivel with an ab crunch. Universals for hips that get you fully out to the side, somewhat limited forward. Universals for hips that get you fully out to the side, not limited forward. Thigh swivel, thigh swivel. Double jointed knee for the full run. Technically perhaps a double jointed knee, but pretty much a single jointed knee that gets you the full run as well for the most part. No ankle tilts, but you get the full rocker. Slight ankle tilt up, you do get an ankle tilt down, and you get a more limited rocker. I'll be honest with you, I actually thought this was going to be a bit closer, but as it turns out, Takara takes the shoulders, the wrists, the hips for the front movement, and the ankles for the up and down motion, whereas the DS only takes the torso for having a waist swivel. So everything else is tied. Takara is just, they've been putting a lot of emphasis on articulation recently, and this continues to prove that it is no exception. Scale-wise, we'll use Soundwave as the kind of litmus test. And if we take the Sumbo chart, it shows Starscream's head should come up to about the bottom of Soundwave's shoulder, which puts the Takara closer in line than the DS. Now, this has been a point of contention because many people think that the Takara seems small. And I agree. But even if we get the old Seeker mold out, You can see that maybe we've just become accustomed to him being slightly taller. But if we're going for accuracy and we're using something as a blueprint, Takara takes this category, as ironic as it seems. Transformations, great Googa Mooga. I suppose we should talk about it. So look, I don't really enjoy either one of these, to be honest with you. I much prefer the original Takara transformation, probably then the Make Toys, then this Takara's, and then the Transform Element. Transform Element's last on a lot of lists for me in regards to transformations. So I don't really feel like either one of them knocks my socks off, but the only real frustrating part that I ran into with the Takara was dealing with the canopy or can of peas, whereas the Transform Element was just, it was just nightmare after nightmare after nightmare. Like, things don't move properly, they are too stiff, you think you're breaking it when you're actually doing what you're supposed to do. There's just a lot going wrong there. So you can't give it to DS here. You just can't. Alt modes, I think they both kind of nail it. I mean, obviously, I think it's easier to get the Takara to it, but I think that if you're going to talk about it, like, they look really good. I think that Takara maybe is a bit sleeker, but I think that the color scheme is so much better on the DS, and the DS is also pretty sleek itself. And I'm sure you could get it tighter if you had more time with it, or had perhaps more guts to kind of put a little bit more elbow grease into when it didn't necessarily belong to someone else and you didn't want to damage it. So I don't think that there's a stand out kind of smash win here. I think they both kind of do different things well. I think the DS is cleaner underneath because it doesn't have that issue with integrating the accessories into it, whereas I think the Takara is kind of just generally more proportionate and kind of just, I don't know, it looks more dangerous to me. So I'm just going to tie them out for the alt mode. Which one of these do you think looks better?
I think that one at first glance. Oh,
okay.
He's a little twisted, but...
And then feel free to pick them up.
I think I still agree.
Okay. Still going with this one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jana, which one do you think looks better?
That one.
All right, pick them up, move them around a bit, see what everyone does. Which one feels better?
This one feels better.
Which point to it lower? Yep. Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. Selena, which one looks better?
That one.
All right. And here, I'll pass them to you. Which one did you like better feeling wise?
I think I like that one.
Okay. Baby. All right. Which one do you think looks better?
This one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. And which one? Well, you can hold them. Which one do you think feels better?
That one.
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we get our final score. And this is, without a doubt, the most interesting and compelling to me versus that I've ever got to experience. Like, this is my favorite versus video that I've ever done. Look how many ties there are. Only 2. We don't really get that very often. So, like, this is the reason why. They're both good, they just do different things better. This is a classic situation of kind of picking your poison in terms of what does it for you. But they tie in hardware. The reason why they tie there is because they both have it, and I gave the point to materials for DS because their hardware actually works across the board, whereas the Takara one does not, but they both have it. So I tied them out there, but gave the materials point to DS, even though the plastic quality is sort of negligible between the two. They also tied in alt mode because neither of them are perfect, but both of them are great. And then we get to points. DS takes build of materials, which we've already kind of covered. They also take the sculpt because they just ended up winning categories within isolation. They won in presence due to objective opinions. They win in price due to objective facts. And they win in accuracy because of the color. I can't give the Takara the credit for accuracy to tie them out when the color palette is off. It's just too dark, in my opinion. Some of this stuff is always going to come down to opinion. But Takara takes accessories because they have far more. They take gimmicks because it has like the nose cone stuff, it has the rocket stuff and the wings and all that stuff. It just has more. It takes articulation by a landslide, which I didn't expect. It takes paint because it's a better painted figure and it doesn't have the paint rub issues that the DS has. It takes scale, somewhat by surprise, but it does. And it takes transformation because the DS is in my top 5 worst transformations of all time. And that brings us to, I think, our first tie. Maybe I'm wrong, but if it's not our first tie, it's certainly our first tie with this many points on the board. But a tie between DS and Takara, 6-6. This is just, I'll tell you, a lot of these versus videos, they're kind of labor intensive. Like, it's a lot of editing, all the letters, the check marks, the dashes, the tie marks, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's a lot of work that goes into it. It's a lot of time that goes into it. And I'll tell you, a lot of times it doesn't feel worth it to me, but I do it because I feel like people expect it and people want it. So This is one that is the exception. This was one of the most fascinating ones for me because they did so well, but in different categories. And what it really shows is that it's not that one thing is better than the other. It's that you care more about a set of things than perhaps you do about the other. And how you view those things should interpret how you feel about that thing. That specific piece. And then because it checks all those boxes for you, you feel confirmed in your bias regarding how you feel. And yet, maybe it's time to acknowledge that this thing does some other great things as well. So I thought that was really interesting and very rewarding to kind of see. Stuff now is so good. You know, that like if you look at most of the verses, so many categories tie. Because most people are doing things really well. So it was interesting here that it wasn't many ties and they just do a set of things kind of one better than the other and vice versa. If I'm not buying either one of these. But if I were to buy one, I would 100% buy the Deformation Space. I would 100% buy it. It would be my choice. I think the posability, the color, the larger scale, even though not accurate, and the presence, it just does more for me. So if I was going to get one, that would be the one I would get. A lot of people have been asking me to compare the Make toys to it. Since it tied with the Takara, but it tied in different categories, I'd be willing to do it. If that's what you guys want to see, please let me know in the comments that you want to see it. If I see enough of it, then I'll do it. If I don't see enough of it, I'll assume that everybody's kind of ready to move on. I'm good either way. I'm happy to do it either way. Just let me know what you guys want and I will try to facilitate that. And tomorrow is the Zoom meeting on Patreon, so I'm looking forward to that. If I haven't posted it on Patreon yet, folks, it's going to be tomorrow, probably between 4 and 5. I'll update y'all. No yelling this time, I promise. I was carried away. All right, till next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Till next time, take care.